Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Online Selling Partner Podcast. Today, I have with me a very special guest named Tyler, and he's got an awesome background, and I can't wait to hear from him. Tyler, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the audience how you got to the point where you're at today?
No problem. Hello everyone. My name is Tyler Boswell. I work for a company called Harmon Kardon. You most likely know us as JBL.
Yep.
I live up here in the Pacific Northwest, and to the anomaly of most people selling to Amazon, I sell to more than just Amazon. And I always like to say my career is an anomaly because if you would have told 20-something me that your career path in sales and CPG would start with beer and pizza and end in speakers, I wouldn't believe you.
Yeah. Oh man, that's crazy. That was a great little synopsis of how you got to where you're at. So I'm sure let's peel back that onion a little bit. So tell us about
Or
the beginning. Tell us about the pizza and how did you get to speakers?
no, it's not common, especially because I grew up in a sales mentality, a sales household. Out of
Yeah.
university, I was actually going to go into tech. I worked at Microsoft for a very short time. I found out that that's just not me. I learned on the merchandising side of things for those who, young 20 somethings going to parties. Like, why not just work in a thing that allows me to have fun? So I ended up working on the merchandising side for a larger company, that rolling into sales roles, cold calling, kind of the boots on the ground, old school style, get no door slammed in your face styles on the CPG. But throughout this whole time, even to where I am today, I continue to take, whether it was courses online, just talking to people, seeking out what would be the next best thing. I also am fortunate to live in the Northwest where I happen to have my two accounts, Costco and Amazon.
Nice.
Just understanding the growth of those companies and living in proximity to them definitely leads to an easier pathway. But the one consistent thing is keeping myself in a growing state. So where I made the jump, if you will, from beer to cheese or beer to pizza specifically was learning, CPG planning and merchandising and making the realization I needed, some real traction with a large enterprise. I worked for a cheese company. It's based out of Canada called Saputo. Most people haven't heard of them, but what you have heard is probably about our string cheese, our Frigo string cheese.
Okay.
Uh, so working for those guys.
Nice.
And this is also paired with being a 1099. I worked for myself, learning Seller Central, understanding like small importers, learning kind of on the fly how Amazon is set up. Because really, if you think about it, 10 or so years ago, Amazon wasn't always the go-to place to buy everything across the board. They were getting there, but most suppliers were still figuring out how to use Amazon, who to even talk to. Amazon 10, 15 years ago was a company that was so big but knew quite how to break the ice and get into their shell if you were a massive brand name or already a well-established supplier and other retailers. So my
It's
expertise
still
came from
pretty.
those
It's still
small
pretty
people
difficult.
getting. Yeah, it is difficult, even if you're a big.
Yeah, but anyway, your expertise was the small. What were you saying?
Yeah, the import suppliers from across the world, private label OEM stuff. But what it allowed me to do was essentially set up their businesses, get their pricing down. This is kind of being the leg man of getting their businesses going. Uh, but my primary focus, although was a nice side business to help me get stabilized and understand e-commerce. I focused on cheese for Costco, which sounds like an abstract concept, but
Yeah.
I was international finance and commodity management for a large account across multiple countries. And at the time, we were doing over 80 million pounds of cheese per year. So as you can imagine, not a
That's
lot
why.
of market, but made me understand scale. And I love Costco. I'm a big Costco person, but I also understand the other side of the coin of e-commerce. And I myself, as a Prime member, like many of the people who probably listen to the podcast and are, you
Yeah.
need to understand commerce today. And that's where learning about, okay, I was in cheese. I want to make, a more brand name approach of make a little more money overall, just bigger business. And kind of on a whim, I applied for this role at Harmon Kardon, and it was for a Amazon Costco position, which I don't know in your experience, Isaiah, if you've ever talked to a lot of people like that. We don't. There's very few of us right now.
That's a unique role.
It is, and you couldn't think of companies that are 20 minutes from each other that are polar opposite in the way they operate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it lent, thankfully, to my strength to come then to Harmon Kardon JBL. We've grown our business significantly, but that transition to Vendor Central was a very distinct one. And there's a lot more pieces of data there that I think go underutilized, but also is a moving target within Amazon itself to get a clear answer a lot of times. I'm sure other people can voice that same concern.
I would assume like you guys have been on Amazon Vendor Central since the beginning of Vendor Central for like 20 plus years, but is that not the case?
Not necessarily. Most, like any retailer, most major brands are always a little tepid to jump in full bore.
Yeah.
Really started going big in the last 5 to 10 years. Where
Okay.
it really started to take off was, going with direct importing. But as we've scaled up our business with Amazon, so has Vendor Central capabilities, accessing, reporting, all these little benefits that come with that. It is
Nice.
putting a lot of eggs into the Amazon basket,
Yeah.
but Amazon isn't going anywhere anytime fast. So it only makes sense for us, especially because I'm right across the water.
Yeah.
If I need to have an emergency meeting, I can go in on a Tuesday and sit down with my vendor manager.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a really a luxury because not everybody can just go sit down with their vendor manager
yeah,
virtually.
and I do at times feel like I said, there's many pieces of Vendor Central that are underutilized. One of them is just having the access. Um,
Correct.
Within Vendor Central, and if I'm talking too much, Isaiah, please feel free to ask a question and tell me to be quiet. Is
No, I love
just
it.
there's so much information. It takes a team to truly digest and get the value out of it, regardless of what size of industry or what size of vendor you are at Amazon. There's always new features being added. Sometimes the data isn't right, and we have to go backwards and work with Amazon to verify the data. There's always these constant challenges.
Where do you spend 80%? I know the 80/20 rule, right? Where does your team spend 80% of their time focusing on with Amazon and Vendor Central?
Well, I first should preface that where essentially we have two teams.
Okay.
We have one team where the focus predominantly relies on product and forecasting and pricing and order management, making
Okay.
the gears work, those little pieces that actually make the business happen. The flip
Operations.
side of that is we actually have a separate meeting with a different Amazon group on the Amazon advertising piece, which that I would consider, my marketing, my advertising, my budget spend, my display clicks, all these other people. So I say 80%, but it's really a 50-50, but 100% of a 50-50 each side.
Yeah.
We have scaled up rather quickly
Mm.
compared to a lot of vendors. And with that comes efforts to scale up quickly internally as well. For us, that involves, everything. Because before it was me and our small group of people, it was just my boss, and he was doing a lone man show, and I don't know how many hours he has in a day. But we have people who help us audit for PDPs, people who help us ensure map pricing is consistent, that if our third parties are authorized, these are the correct authorized ones. So there's a lot of moving pieces. So I can't truly in confidence say 80% of my time is focused on one thing. My
Mm.
time is focused on the long-term relationship with Amazon. That's
Okay.
planning, understanding where our growth is going to be coming from. How are we going to then a forecast and plan on the back end? But with Amazon specifically, Prime Big Deal Days, which just happened in October,
Yeah.
for a lot of people was far more competitive this year compared to the year prior, because the first year it happened, which we called it Peas, I finally got used to being called Peas. Then they changed the name. It was a record year for a lot of people because it wasn't the macro effect it is today. Prime Day, people can plan on promo around. They inserted a new holiday. There wasn't a lot of competition, so they really performed well. Now that behavior has been established. Just
Mm.
like how I know many of us for Black Friday, Cyber Monday are looking a week earlier. Same thing is now happening. They're literally dictating consumer behavior. So now we have to try to work with Amazon to make sure we meet those behavior needs.
Okay, and let's dig into that a little bit more. So, what kind of behavior did you guys give Amazon that they wanted?
I think I lost you there just for a second. Are you referring to the behavior of the customer, the end customer?
You mentioned that the behavior Amazon had certain expectations of behavior, so I was just wanting to dig into that.
Yeah,
What
no.
those expectations were.
That also planning obviously for not only the proper events, but just so that from all competition, they are still, they're the big dog. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
That are still held in priority, and we do our best to do that. It's just a very fascinating world that they can now create a consumer holiday, and it swings every retailer to abide to that. That to
that is
me is fascinating.
pretty fascinating. And so, your deals, what do you usually look for? Like 10, 20% off, and is it you're funded, or like what's kind of what are the numbers you look for in deals, and what do you recommend for people out there that are trying to set their deals with Amazon?
So it's a little tricky on if you want to do a new item and in versus what category you're in, just as a preface. For
Yeah,
our categories, we try not to do promotions within, the first 90 days. We want to make sure there's a value established so that
yes,
when we do promo, there actually is the adjusted value.
makes
Um,
sense.
the last thing you want to do as a supplier is introduce a product, say just $100, and a month later you're promoting it down, say 20 points to $80. That's from a time frame perspective has been too short, and the customer is valuing that dollar at 80 and not the product that you think that should be perceived as 100. So this also comes from perspective of brand. How one values your brand, if you're trying to build a brand or if you're trying to generate revenue.
Correct.
We have a brand.
Hmm.
We try to capitalize on that brand as much as we can.
Hmm.
Those are some of the parameters we set in place just on how we would like to promotion. But Amazon, if you give them 50%, they'll take it.
Yeah,
We try not to oversaturate the promotional market with us just because we have such a depth of different consumer electronics, and it doesn't do fair to the brand and the overall projections that we're trying to build, especially if you're trying to transition to new models, if you're just racing yourself and Amazon in general racing you to the bottom.
okay. And um, is with the promotions on Seller Central versus Vendor Central, right? Like
Mhm.
uh, I know like on Seller Central, you're just reducing your price, right? But with Vendor Central, since you're selling the product to Amazon, you're actually funding that reduction, correct? Oh, did I lose you there, Tyler? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. So I was saying with Seller Central, you're actually reducing the price, but with Vendor Central, you're actually funding the price reduction. Is that correct?
Yes and no.
Okay,
So
yeah. Let's dig into
that
that.
is an interesting take.
Yeah.
So you can, in many ways, do sell through credits by unit, which then gets hit on the back end. There's
Yes.
also cases where a volume of a deal is very large,
Okay.
and Amazon is requesting unique pricing.
Okay.
So Prime Day, for example, we're going through negotiations like every other vendor right now. We're trying to get this locked in already. Uh,
Yeah.
but as certain quantities, in lieu of a sell-through credit, they'll ask for unique pricing.
Hmm.
Now, that is each company's own case. Many do, many don't. It's just a matter of where you're taking the dollar hit. For us, it makes more sense financially to negotiate the pricing up front because we also do direct importing with Amazon, which not everyone does.
Correct.
So that's a benefit we've been able to utilize.
Mm.
But the downside to that is there's a lot of planning and negotiation that goes into it. So for example, like I said, Prime Day 2024, we're like finalizing that this week. Basically, it's
Wow. That's a lot of
interesting methods.
that is pretty interesting. And how is your direct import going? I've heard some people say that there's been some increases with the cost of direct import, and they're having problems with direct import. But it's, some people say it's great. So how's it going for you?
For our industry specifically, it's great.
Okay.
We have been utilizing DI more, just based off of the scale that we're able to bring in with it. It allows us to plan further out.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon also, as long as it's financially beneficial for both parties, obviously it makes sense. But to the flip side of that, our European counterparts don't use DI, and we're equitable business sizes. So to each their own in terms of how you want to use DI, but there's many companies that if there's a lot of labor involved, there's just a lot of co-packing, it doesn't make a lot of sense for all those transferring pieces. We find that based on how our business operates, DI has been very beneficial for us, and really only has been 3-4 years since we truly utilized DI to the scope it is today.
And I really appreciate that take on DI. And so what I'd like to hear is, I mean, there's a million things I could ask you, but your previous strategy for your company compared to
Mm-hmm.
what it is now, sounds like you guys are really going all in on Amazon Vendor Central. You mentioned before you're also doing some things with Seller Central. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
brands, they don't have any strategy really. They're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
selling Vendor Central without really focusing on it. And then they got a bunch of 3P sellers that are kind of doing their thing and they're not really focused on it. So kind of what was the strategy before, and then how did that morph, and tell us about your guys' mindset, and because obviously you're doing something right, you're growing the business, and I think a lot of brands would like to be in the spot where you're at.
Yeah,
So
no, it's the right direction. That's the goal.
yeah, exactly.
What we have found is, specifically from where we started, is making sure your products and the authenticity of your products or your brand is
Mm-hmm.
is vetted and under control. We have a select group of third-party people who we also let them sell on Amazon. They're authorized, but I know there's a lot of people who they'll put a product that they worked really hard on, their startup business, and 3 months later there's some direct import from ABQZIIA, all caps with 3 exclamation marks, with a duplicate of their product at a third of the price, and that's very frustrating. So our team is
Yes.
very diligent in managing that side of our business more, especially with the scale of business we have, because one vendor here or there, it's going to happen. When it becomes an impact on your business, you have to make sure you lean in and say, this is our brand, it's our product. And Amazon doesn't want your business to be tarnished either.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll make sure, because if you're a growing business and you've been building this partnership with your vendor manager, that your success is their success. They want you to do well, and they'll make sure that whether it's assuring that only the authorized people can sell your products, or hey, I have a question on this data point in Vendor Central. Hey, what's going on with the data? It's not updating this pricing correctly. We just have an issue, not an issue, a situation where the reporting was showing 2 different dollar amounts and we couldn't figure out why. And it turned out one of the aspects was the Vine program counts it as a technical sale zeroed out. So it brings down the overall average sales price, versus we thought there was someone out there violating our map pricing, which we participated in. So there's little details here and there, which the Amazon team help us figure out. Like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of little pieces, and sometimes everyone needs assistance to figure out what the truth is in terms of what I'm looking at.
I see. So for somebody that's in your shoes, I'd love to just hear more tips, tricks, and experiences that you've had for people that are in your shoes and that are trying to
Of
get to the
course,
spot where you're today.
I would say some of the biggest tips and tricks is always talk with your supply team, always talk with your supply team, always talk with your supply team.
Nice.
with Born to Run, for example.
Yeah.
Everyone, you launch new products. You don't want to be on the hook if something isn't performing as well. Really try to really mitigate your risk in terms of what you want Born to Run. We all have big eyes like, oh, this product will sell 1,000 units in 2 months, and it doesn't. You don't want to
Yeah.
be that. So you want to work closely with timing, inbounds, exclusivity, ensuring that if you are going to Born to Run something, and if you know you have a promotion coming up, or if it's a new product, you're very thoughtful about the amounts that you're executing, so that when you're submitting that order to your order management team, it gets filled out. Hey guys, it already sold 100%. It builds confidence not only for your Amazon side, but it builds confidence in your internal piece as well. You don't want to be on the hook for 800 units that didn't sell, and then all of a sudden you get a chargeback fee of 25% or whatever the heck it is. I think another crucial tip would be have a great relationship with your SVS or SAS, as they're now called.
Yes.
Not all people pay the additional fee to have a vendor service specialist or a service specialist. We do. We found that fee was very, very beneficial if we had restricted access or reduced access to our vendor manager. One thing we found is, granted, Amazon is notorious for higher turnover.
Yes.
You want to make sure that you have excellent right off the bat communication. All expectations are communicated, because realistically, you're not their only account.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you have a question on Vendor Central, hey, I'm seeing that this forecast has this. Does this factor in all the promotions and the agreements we sent to you last week? Making sure, because their lives are just as busy as all of ours, that all those little detail points have been factored in. And ultimately, we're all human. People make mistakes. I have had to reject a few agreements saying, hey, that is 3 times the sell-through credit we agreed upon. Hey, that's not what we discussed. Things happen. We're all very human, but you gotta make sure to stay on the detail-oriented side of this Amazon business, because those little whoopsies can really, really ripple effect. And if you're Amazon, there's a lot of eyeballs on you, so you want to make sure that you're, back to one of my original points, being thoughtful on everything you bring to your table, internally and externally.
I love it. I love it, Tyler. So that was just good. You're constantly just giving us all kinds of great nuggets, and I think for someone who, go ahead.
Oh, I said, nuggets, love it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So how big is your team? Internal.
That's a great question. Realistically, my advertising side is only like 4 to 5 people. My supply side, if you can call them that, because I don't truly call them just like my supply team. I have my forecasting, my DI, but we're going to include that as a whole lump sum, probably closer to 7 to 8 people. And the flip to that also is, I'm not the only account. We have a lot of other accounts. So granted, Amazon is a major focus. You have to be understanding, and there's times where shipments get delayed.
Yeah.
We just did a massive warehouse transition this year. So that completely changes how we operate, how things are being executed. Little details that other people can be taking consideration, specific with the supply side. The e-com side really has been coming more on a focus for Amazon. We have our own internal e-commerce piece, but
Nice.
we all know I think the last metric was over 60% or something wild for consumer electronics being purchased through Amazon. So
I heard that.
With understanding, the MPD data, the types of visibility we're getting from the market as a whole, they've been allocating. We make sure to allocate resources to make sure Amazon is taken care of from the merchandising and digital side.
So I have 2 questions. One revolves around Seller Central, and the other revolves around the entire market over in a whole. But I'll start with the Seller Central question. So, what is your strategy with Seller Central versus Vendor Central? When do you guys utilize Seller Central? Are you mainly just utilizing it through your own Seller Central account or through the authorized 3P sellers that you have, and why would you have an ASIN go Seller Central or Vendor Central, or do you do both to have backups, or like what is your strategy around Seller Central and Vendor Central?
Seller Central right now, we've gotten away, at least in the States, we really have gotten away from it just
Okay.
because the scale of business has allowed us to not utilize it as much. But there are third party distributors, say in like Latin America,
Okay.
where it makes sense. But once again, that becomes with a legal piece. I'm not fully versed in that, so I don't want to speak to it.
That's fine.
What comes out interesting out of Seller Central is just mitigating your costs, because we also understand, when you have a Seller Central, when your overall will just be paying more costs. It's just the way of the beast. But understanding, I would say, your warehousing, your storage, because for even some of the smaller vendors I used to manage in a previous life, a lot of the concerns were the turnover, the storage, the fees. If you're bringing product in, it's not moving, all of a sudden you're getting hit with back-to-back storage fees or penalties. It depends on your business, but you really need to be more thoughtful about your sell-through rate, because what you don't want to have happen is, say, Amazon brings in all your product, 3 months, it's not picking up. Oh, that's time you could have been, say, investing in ads, investing in search, repositioning how your pricing is working, or just scaling back efforts and bringing product back in, really trying to reconfigure, which all things I understand take costs, but
Yeah.
it takes a little longer to immediately get traction out the gate with Seller Central versus Vendor Central. And that's the biggest challenge, I would say. And we saw that, and we migrated with the scale of business to Vendor Central, and we've seen more success with that.
Okay.
And
So you
then
don't.
the question was around, well,
My following question is the electronic industry. There seems to be a lot of Chinese or Asian companies jumping into the Amazon market, and how has that affected JBL and your business, and what do you think the electronics market is going to be in the next 5 years with this new challenge that we didn't have 10 years ago?
that's a great question. I think it's a challenge in the sense of it's more of a pricing challenge rather than a quality challenge.
Okay.
A lot of times what we see is if we lose on Amazon, it's really because of price.
Okay.
So you're going after a competitor that is going more or less on law of large numbers. We have been around for over 70 years. We have a very well established brand and reputation. And most people don't realize that the vast majority of our business is in a car. So
Okay.
if you drive or in a commercial space, so if you've ever been to the SoFi Stadium, or if you drive a Toyota, our speakers and our electronics are in both those places. So we are fortunate is that we are insulated from the CE space in a lot of times that way. The other side to that is Amazon doesn't want to become a competitor against brand, because what they saw with the evacuation of Nike. I don't know if you remember this. It was Nike originally was on Amazon. They said no,
Yeah.
they're cutting ship, and they went back to their own platform. That was a big hit for them. Amazon needs the branded products. They need people to invest in marketing, where that's what brands like us come in. We will invest in the partnership of Amazon and whoever to make sure that we're both successful. A Chinese or any other Asian direct importer, or pick a nation. It's a price and revenue driver. It's not a brand investment piece. It's not designed to build a long-term business. It's designed to move dollars. So if you great example, JBL, JBL, we're around everywhere. You may not know us, but you know us. If there's a comparable version of that to a direct import, I'm willing to listen. But most people in the consumer space are buying in branded products, brands they trust, whether that's Apple, Bose, Sony, JBL, Beats, pick one. People buy established track record and not for price. So we've seen an interesting trend where people are actually spending more on the premium products, like the banded headphones. But there's also those that are more value driven, and we're not saying no to those customers. They're going to shop the way they want to shop, whatever retailer they want to shop at. we just want to make sure the value of and the quality of what we built is still resonating. We're not chasing the dollars downward. We're chasing the status and the quality of the products we bring in, because I don't know about you, what kind of headphones you use. There's a difference between a $20 headphone and a $100 headphone.
Of course, yeah.
So either you can buy five $20 headphones, or you take care of the $100 headphone you like. And the customer with Amazon, higher earning customer, disposable income, you want to make sure you're in line with their end market.
I love that.
I see there's growth.
So do you have anything else you'd like to leave the audience with? One last nugget.
Other than this, wow, this guy talks a lot. The only thing I will say is with Amazon in particular, because I know the focus is on Amazon, is always double check your data, because there are always times, remember, it's a big machine. Sometimes things don't move the way we want it to. Ask a question. Hey, is this the right information I'm looking at? Because there's always been times where it doesn't matter what scale of business you have. If you aren't looking at apples to apples, it makes future meetings challenging, and that you want both pieces to win. You want yourself to win, and you want Amazon to win, because why don't you want to win? That's all I got.
And like, what data are you looking at the most? Is it net PPM, or like what numbers you're focused on?
Whether it's net PPM is a good metric to look on. We look at OPS when we're on deal versus off deal. We're making sure that our on hand weekly on hand is consistent. If we're running tight and we know we have a promo coming up, to give them a little nudge towards the right direction. We actually, every week, we send, hey, this is what we have in the bucket. Is this aligned with what your system wants? And we kind of do that little human check on the automated Skynet system that they've created. We also look at, lost buy box. We look at all these different metrics in conjunction, so that when we have our weekly reports, our monthly reports, where it's saying, hey, we were on promotion, our net PPM went up, our net PPM went down. We saw more out of stocks when we aren't on promo here, where we aren't. You want to make sure you're getting all these little details, so when you zoom out and get the big picture, not only is your team able to adapt and improve, but you could tell a bigger success story, because you're saying, hey, we're covering all bases. We're making sure that Amazon can execute fully, because we've given them all the tools to execute.
I love it. And how can people reach out to you?
You can find me at LinkedIn. First is Tyler Boswell. You'll see me. I have more gray hair in that photo for some reason. Or worse come to worse, I'm also on Instagram at, I believe it's Tyler J. Boz, B-O-Z. Feel free to reach out. I'm always around. And if you're in the Northwest area, want to get a coffee and just talk business, or talk about pizza, or talk about music, I'm always around to chit chat.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tyler, for jumping on.
Thank you, Isaiah, for your time today. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely.